a Harvard pass out, Rohan, they always tell me that they've got the vision to change the world from there. So what is it that Harvard gave you? What is it that you learned out there?
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I think I'm too small a person to believe that I'll change the world or any such thing. All that I know is I have a few skill sets. I can work hard, and that's in my control. And I hope that these skill sets will be useful in making some kind of a local change somewhere. And if I get lucky, maybe it means something. So that's all that I would really say.
Sure. But, so where I'm coming from is that, maybe everybody, did you get a big dream from Harvard? Did it in some way change your thinking about how you saw things, or probably some important moments at Harvard that you can remember and you can share with us?
I think it has less to do, or it's not as specific to any single university. I mean, I was just sitting with a couple of my peers who were at IIT Madras, and fantastic institution, right? I think ultimately at least in my limited opinion, our dreams and our hopes to a large extent are shaped by the people we surround ourselves with. And I think going to any great university, the IITs or the triple ITs or the NITs or many other institutions in India or anywhere else in the world affords you an opportunity of being surrounded by people who are all doing fairly interesting things, and you push each other and you learn from each other. And perhaps maybe I'm very influenced by that. And as an example or a case in point, at the Society of Fellows, one of our peers is Amartya, and it's very easy to look up to him and to aspire to do something. I mean, maybe not at his level, but at least something that will matter to people. Our chairman of our society is actually a very unique academic. His name is Wally Gilbert. He won the Nobel, I think, in 1980, and I think he used part of that money to start what is today a very large biopharma company named Biogen, and he was the founder and the chairman, an academic who also ended up being a very successful entrepreneur and so on. So I've been very fortunate to have an opportunity to interact with some of these people and to learn a few things from them. And in the course of it, it kind of shapes part of how I think, I guess. So.
Sure. So I understand that you developed a great interest for Indian history while you were there at Harvard, and you now started your own non-profit organization, which is Murty Classical Library. So, for somebody who is a computer science doctorate, a techie and a coder, and you started coding really, really early, how did Murty Classical Library come to happen?
Yeah, okay. Now I understand how I should have answered your question better. So one of the things that I started in 2009 is a not-for-profit institution. What we do is, our goal is to get more and more people to read and celebrate classics that originated in this part of the world. So today when you say classics, all over, pretty much, people refer to Greek and Latin books. Whereas, why shouldn't you be reading poetry or prose or plays from, let's say, old Kannada, or of course Sanskrit or medieval Marathi or Punjabi and medieval Bangla or old Tamil and so on and so forth. Our goal is to do this at least for the next 100 years. And so we work with scholars across several countries. Every year we translate and publish 5 to 6 new books. And my goal with this is sort of the next generation in India as they grow up, in addition to reading Shakespeare and all these other wonderful things that we already read today, they'll also read some pan-Indian classics and hopefully celebrate our culture at least as much as we celebrate Western culture.
Sure. And I mean, what's the way forward? I mean, what books or what scriptures in history are you looking to work upon? Or
so we are currently in our 5th year of publishing, and we have published about 19 volumes. We have covered, I think, about 10 or 11 classical Indian languages. We have published books from Pali. For example, among the oldest poetry written by women that is still accessible to mankind is in Pali. It's a text from 200 BC called the Therigatha. And it's in a Burmese script. I'm willing to bet there are probably fewer than 100 people on this planet who can still read this script, this text. And we have translated it end to end with a very high quality translation. It's the stories of how the first set of women became nuns. Buddhist nuns, as an example, right? So like this, sort of this is incredible diversity of texts that we have translated, and the way forward for us is, so by the way, if you're now a student at Harvard, not only do you read Homer and the Iliad and all these other Greek texts, you also now read Indian texts as part of, regular coursework, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's not just at Harvard. I mean, there are other universities beginning to do this. There are universities in India, like in Ashoka and a few other places where people are beginning to use these texts. The ultimate hope or my dream is that I would love for students everywhere around the world to learn to grow up to celebrate ancient Indian literature as much as they celebrate Western literature, which is the case today.
And do you see doing this probably, once you've probably exhausted all the scriptures in India and all the history in India, do you see doing this globally for countries where there's a lot of history out there, but it has not sort of got transformed for readers?
No, you're right. The Chinese are doing it for themselves. I know from the Middle East, there's an Arabic sort of version of this. The Indian one is the largest and most complex translation effort because we have 14 classical languages. I think we have enough and more to do here that not just my lifetime, the next 10 lifetimes anybody has, I still think will not be done. So, because if you just think about it, in each one of these languages, there are millions of texts, millions of texts. And we are only doing 5 to 6 per year.
Right.
So we'll almost never catch up. Right, so.
So now interestingly, I think, and this is something all of us, I'm sure, want to know, that, with your such interesting history of being a computer scientist, you've never thought of doing a pure play technology startup, something in e-commerce or AI or...
So I'll just say one thing before I answer your question. I don't think it is incompatible to be a technical person and to read history and classics and so on. In fact, if we ever give people that impression, I think it's wrong. I think all of us should, at least in my opinion, should know our mother tongue, our history, our language, our culture, our music, in addition to perhaps our day jobs being something to do with tech. But more specifically to your question, so actually these days, over the last couple of years, what I've been sort of working on fairly quietly, I'll add, with several of my colleagues from my graduate school days, is we're thinking very deeply. I'll tell you, without making it too technical, at a very high level, we think very deeply about why do humans trust each other, and what is it? If you think about your work colleagues, or you hire, let's say, somebody in one of your companies, you trust them to do a job right. What behaviors do they have that creates that notion of trust? Like if I have to work for you and you ask me to do something and I don't do it right, well, you can come back and ask me why I didn't do it right. I'm accountable to you. I can explain my behavior. I can explain my decisions to you. Tomorrow, if you want me to do something else, I can very quickly learn and adapt and so on and so forth. So we humans have these wonderful traits that I think generates trust. So what some of us have been trying to do is to think of how do we get humans to trust machines approximately in the same way that you get humans trust each other. So how do you infuse some of these traits into machines? Now, of course, it sounds like a great, grand problem. I don't want to give you that impression. But that's at least the vector of the kinds of problems that we are solving. And why is it very important to solve this? The reason it's very important to solve this is, particularly, if you read the news and there's far too much hype, by the way, at least in my opinion, of automation and so on, as if everything will be automated, machines will do everything. I'm a computer scientist. I'm bred to believe in the superiority of silicon over carbon. Machines can't do most things. In fact, they can't do most things right that babies can do far better. But even then, I still think that in this age, when people think of automation and so on, the thing that people are not thinking about is this is not just replacing a human with a few lines of code. That's I think, grossly unjust to a human being, because humans are so much more complex, so much more capable. So if you really want to write software that can do a person's job, I think the bar has to be much higher. And it really ultimately comes down to trust. How do you get a machine to do something so well that or how do you get it to do something well enough the way a person does that you can begin to trust that machine? And so at a very sort of broad level, these are the kinds of things that I've been putting my technical skills to use over the last few years. And you know, some version of this problem will impact and affect every industry when done right, ultimately by someone.
So is it like a industry-oriented project for you right now, or is it like I mean, as I said, a world-changing project?
Again, I don't know about world-changing. It's a set of very interesting technical problems that I'm spending my time working on. I'll just leave it at that. So
I mean, so this is one project that we found out which you're sort of very passionate about. Are there some other businesses that, I'm sorry, am I missing something here? Okay. So are there some other businesses that, or I would say just projects at that, that you also have, or you're currently pursuing, maybe as a co-founder or as a mentor to some other technology businesses?
no, actually, I would say by and large, between these two things, most of my time is occupied. I have a third venture that I'm starting now, which is, I'll give you again just the high-level idea of what we do. I was recently at a dinner with an art historian friend who asked me, can you name 5 great women artists? And I didn't know. And I mean, I'll also admit, you know, I am a tech person, so that whenever convenient, I use that as the excuse. And I said I can name Frida Kahlo and no one else. And so this person said, no, there's actually a systemic problem. There are great women artists whose work today is severely undervalued. And you almost never hear of them, you don't know of their work, and so on. And so I received an education. And so I was very excited. I thought I learned something new and maybe we can do something about it. And so this colleague of mine and I are now in the throes, she's an art historian at Princeton, of yet another non-profit, if you will, where our goal is to create the most impressive and undervalued collection of art created by women across the globe. And not because of any monetary value, but in 30 years from now, when people look back, they should say, this is the collection that we should study to truly understand women's art and to educate the world about women artists. And today, maybe many people don't yet see value in it, but we think in 30 years from now, it will make a difference. And so it's still in the early throes. So yeah, I would say these 3 things I keep busy.
That's great. Are you sure you don't want to remember another project?
No, I'll leave it at this for now, yeah.
Okay. So, you know, and this is something personally which is very interesting for me to know always from an entrepreneur, and especially from you, because you're a scholar first and an entrepreneur second. So what is your take on entrepreneurship? How do you see it as a purpose of getting up every day and working, I mean, pretty much like whatever, 8 hours to 16 hours, depending upon an individual's capacity? What is your take on entrepreneurship?
So I'll say a couple of things, and by no means is my experience unique. My peers were sitting at that same table that I was sitting. I think they perhaps would have had the same or perhaps even better experience than I've had. My view of entrepreneurship is influenced by my own journey and also to a reasonable extent the journey that I witnessed amongst my family in my house. There are many different ways I can describe it. I think one is I have, at least for the first 25 years of my life, I've seen that it's all about deferred gratification. It is never about here and now. It is perhaps one day at some point later on something will turn out well. It is never about if I do this now then tomorrow something will turn better. I think that's the first trait. The second is my own personal experience is it's also about how much pain you can take and how much disappointment you can take, how many no's you can take. And despite all of that, and how many roadblocks you can sort of go around, despite all of that, you still find some way forward. And third, it's also, actually I'll say about the second thing, right? I think there's a certain narrative when you read in the papers or press and so on. Again, this is my experience, maybe my peers have a different view. You'd hear about, you'd almost think this is a fantastic lifestyle, it's a very sexy lifestyle and, you know, world changers and so on. Yeah, those are very few people, perhaps, who end up having that experience at the end, but even almost always getting there. And I've witnessed this amongst my own parents too. It is tremendous sacrifice, tremendous pain. And by the way, it's not unique to entrepreneurship. I think you want to do anything worthwhile.
Correct.
Right? I mean, the great professors that I know, the great researchers that I know, the great business folks that I've had an opportunity to meet, or great artists or whoever else, everybody who wants to do anything worthwhile experiences tremendous pain and sacrifice. And it's not bad. I mean, you do it because you're so passionate about the end result. So it is not one of these things that I think the world has a far rosier view than the people who actually lead this life. Of that experience. And finally, it's a love affair, right? I mean, it's like asking somebody, how much do you love your child? Maybe 20%, 40%? No. You love it to the extent that you'll do anything for it, right? And I think that's at least my limited views.
I think that's pretty much everybody in this room would agree with you, like 100% on this. So, you know, what do you see yourself doing in 10 years? Do you see yourself as an author? Or maybe even holding a public office in India?
I have no idea. I mean, if I knew, I'd already be doing it. So, all that I know is I have these three interests right now, and I hope that they turn into something. That's all.
Sure. So. No, but would you, I mean, with all your learnings and, you know, things that you find interesting, would it be worth your while to put it in a book and become an author for it? Is it something you think of?
No, to be honest, no. I don't, no. All that I know is I think my aspirations are, again, no different from everybody in this room. I think when I was in my 20s, I studied philosophy very seriously. I thought there is a definite answer to the question of the purpose of life. And I think many of us at different points and stages of our life ask this question. And my sort of equilibrium answer to that is, by the time, at the end of my life, if it mattered to a few people more than just my family and friends that I lived, then maybe I've done something right. So sure. Beyond that, I don't know. So.
And I'm sure this probably my final question before they ask you a few. And I'm sure this is a common question, and all of us would love to know is, what are your learnings, I mean, as a child and now as an adult and as an entrepreneur, that you have taken from your family, from your father, Rohan Murty, from your mother, that have sort of given you an objective in life, that have made your success possible, and also it's something that you would want to pass and for others to know if it could make or change or bring a difference in their lives?
Yeah, I'll say two things before I answer. First, I don't think I've as yet done anything that I would say is success and so on, at least in my case. Second, far be it for me to preach to anyone else how they should live their lives. I can only tell you what I've learned in my own things thus far. And I'm constantly revising my hypothesis as well. I think doing anything that means something to a lot of people inherently requires a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifice in the short term, in the medium term, and there is no other way around it. And very importantly, you can be very smart, very bright, very wealthy, all these other things, but perhaps the biggest factor that plays an important role is the luck of dice, or is just luck in general, or the roll of dice, I should say, and that we don't control. I've heard my parents repeatedly tell me, saying, "Look, don't think you're too smart. You got lucky, and some genes went the right way, perhaps. And apart from that, there are many other things that happened your way that you never bargained for." And I think that philosophy works very well for me. So.
Well, that's a good thing, but I think eventually it burns down to, what efforts that you have made to get there. And it's probably just, if somebody is supporting your efforts back there, it makes it possible. It just looks like it's something that is achievable.
True. I mean, I tell you, like, the thing, for example, you asked about my family, right? I think there were many, many people who came from the same, both my parents came from my mother came from a middle class family and my father came from a lower middle class family, and that story is not unique, at least in 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s India. And they worked extremely hard. That story is also not unique. There are many people who probably worked as hard, if not harder. And they're certainly not the smartest people. There are many people as smart, if not smarter. But because you're asking, what is it I've learned? But the one persistent thing is, yes, you have to work hard, hope that things go your way. It's also luck. I think that really played a very important role. And that I never forget. So,
and apart from your parents, is there another mentor in your life, somebody who's inspired you to, become a scholar, become an academician?
Yeah, no, actually I have several people I really look up to, living and not living. In terms of the living folks, I have a godmother-like figure whose name is Kiran Mazumdar, who runs Biocon. And before all this big Biocon and so on, I've had the privilege of knowing her. And I think she's just a remarkable woman. She started in India entirely on her own in the 70s. I don't know how too many women entrepreneurs who started like that with very little. And she worked very hard and she got lucky in the same theme of things. And she's totally self-made and tough person and very positive. I always draw inspiration from that, from her story. Of course, from my parents. I have an uncle who's a very well-known astronomer, who's a graduate of IIT Delhi. He's a professor at Caltech, an astrophysicist, and certainly perhaps one of the top few people in his field. So he's my inspiration to be an academic. And also, I have a mentor who, I think his name is Mr. Guru Murty. I think many of you may know who he is. He lives in Chennai. He's a chartered accountant by training. But he's really sort of a defender of India. That's how I think of him. He and I don't necessarily see eye to eye on certain things, but I've learned so much about my country, my culture, and so many things from him. And so really I would say he's a philosophical mentor of sorts to me. So I have many people like this I look up to. So.
Sure, and many more. Would love to have the house lights on, please, if you could give us the lights, and maybe a few questions if our friends in the room would like to ask from Rohan. Could we pass on the mic, please, around? Okay, so before they ask, I have one more to ask you. Okay, if, and this is very cliched, but I think it's something we'll still love to know. But what made you choose computer science all the way up there to become a doctor? I mean, and it's a common thing that, when you're doing your university and you're pursuing your doctorate, you would find many more things interesting and many more streams that you would also want to be a part of. So, anything else that attracted you, and what made you sort of do computer science? Like it's a tall decision to do a doctorate and complete it.
Well, yes and no. I mean, about roughly 850 PhDs in computer science are awarded each year in the US, so I'm not unique in that sense. But again, I can only tell you things that are true only for me. See, when I was actually in 4th standard in school, I certainly was not the most athletic or the tallest or the whatever else in any dimension. But I really stumbled upon a programming book in my house, and that's purely by accident. Because my father was writing code at the time, and I didn't understand much. But I pestered my mother to put me into a class. Those days there was a company called Brilliance Tutorials. I don't know if it is still around anymore. This predates AppTech, and so I found myself as an 8-year-old in this class, which had, funny enough, many 24, 25-year-olds who were in their careers, and then there was just me. And so my mother, told them, saying, just humor him, it's okay. They said, look, madam, he may not understand much, and which was the case. But a couple of months down the line, something clicked, and I felt for the first time I could do something well in my life. I could reason about certain things by looking at code, which I never felt I was good at anything before then. I felt I was very average in many things, and I am. But in this one thing, I suddenly felt, hey, I can do something that perhaps slightly better than the person sitting next to me. And I got very excited. And over a period of time, I spent more and more and more and more time. And this became an obsession for me. Because you find that some of us who are lucky to find one thing we're good at, you just keep doing it over and over again. Kind of, and also, I found that this was, computer science as a discipline was something that I felt I perhaps developed some intuition for. And very importantly, it's sort of like a canvas. When you write code, it's a canvas. It's an empty canvas. And people paint on an empty canvas. They have some idea of the end destination. You don't know how you will get there, but you start painting, and along the way, perhaps, you find different ways and so on. And I felt the exact same thing about my discipline. And so and I also come from a very academic family, so it's very easy in my family to say I want to be an academic, because people just say, oh yeah, what else would you do? And so before I knew it, I knew from very early on that I wanted to get a PhD, I wanted to be a professor, and I wanted to sort of work in this area.
Sure. And do you find, what is it that you specifically like about teaching? Do you teach at Howard?
Not anymore. I quit all my academic connections because I'm busy with other things. I guess I like teaching maybe because I talk a lot. But the idea that you can convey information to another person and that they actually understand what you just said to them and that may make a change to them, that is incredibly exciting. I have never felt as fulfilled in anything else that I've done so far. Particularly when I taught undergraduate students, and you can see in their eyes, when they don't know something and then you say something to them and suddenly their eyes light up because of what you said, they suddenly now see things differently. Right? And by the way, it's not just in the classroom. We experience this every day. Like if you're a salesperson and you're selling to your client, I'm in front of sometimes CXOs, and when I'm finally able to get a point across that they appreciate, then suddenly I feel like, that's magic, right? That one human can convince another human being.
So I've been a professor of economics for 5 years before I became an editor, and I can totally relate to that. But you know what? I think there's a teacher in each one of us, and in our own way, maybe not in a classroom, we probably teach our peers, our subordinates, our juniors, every day in our lives, which sort of makes us all teachers in this room. So happy to take a couple of questions from the audience. If we can pass on the mic, please. Yes, ma'am.
Rohan, can you pinpoint one thing you should do and one thing you should never do?
In context to what?
To be an achiever, to be where you are sitting.
No, I'll again prefix what I said was a couple of things. I don't know what one should or should not do. I can only repeat what I've been raised with. I've constantly been told never to place my self-worth in any externalities like money or what clothes you wear or where you live or how you live or and so on. And the one thing I've been told I definitely should do is to have very good friends. And a measure of a person is the company they keep. Those are two things I know.
Excellent advice.
Hi Rohan, this is Farooq from Liftel Communications Private Limited. I heard in this speech which you were giving, you mentioned you don't feel you are successful. May I ask, what is success for you? Yet.
No, you see, I don't know. I don't think about these things at all. I can only tell you the people I admire, and perhaps maybe because they are successful. I give an example. So my mother, she's written a book. I'm not trying to plug her book. I'm just talking about, her experience, where she and one of her colleagues worked for nearly 20 years to rescue young girls sold into the trade of being Devdasis in the largest Devdasi district in Karnataka. Now, I mean, with her, I've sort of, met some of the people that she's worked with. And today that entire district is Devdasi free, as in all the women have moved in, have alternate sources of income, they have other jobs, and their families have changed, and they have children, and so on. Now that, to me, when I hear of that story, and I hear of the incredibly difficult life story of these women, I mean, there's nothing in, I suspect, in most of our lives here that really measures up to that kind of difficult story of what they've had. And I feel somebody who can help make that kind of change is incredibly successful. It really mattered to those women that my mother lived and did something. So maybe that is success. I don't know. I'm sure some people will say Bill Gates is a very successful man. He's changed, he put a PC on every desktop. That's what they said in 1975. That is success too, of a different kind. So I don't have any general formula and so on. I don't know. I can only tell you the people I admire and why. And maybe there is a pattern.
Maybe one final question from the audience is all we might have time for.
Hey, hi Rohan. This is Vibha here from Sparkle Gene PR Private Limited. In your conversation, you said you learned from non-living things as well. I just want to know more about that.
No, he's saying people that are not probably on this.
People who are not living, yeah.
Sorry, I just misunderstood. Actually, in your whole conversation, what I felt is you are not more attracted to the, famous and the money and all. So you, how will you define yourself? You are different from others in your conversation. You don't talk about money, right? So I feel do you do meditation or something? Can you just explain yourself?
Sorry,
yeah, it's actually a question in my mind. Because we are here for business, right? Even we are here for business purpose, right? But your conversation is completely different. Like you are not...
I don't know, is that a good thing or bad thing? Maybe I'm totally unfit to do anything in business then, but, so I can only tell you the one objective function, the one objective function I solve for repeatedly in my life is I want to do things that will maximize respect. That may be money or not, I don't know, but it has to be respect.
Thank you so much.
And that, I'm quite clear of.
With that beautiful thought, I'm going to have to stop the questions, but I think that is perhaps one of the most honest things I've heard in this forum is that, if you work for respect, money and everything else, what you probably aspire for will probably follow. So I think that's
actually, I wouldn't even say that, sorry. I have no idea whether that gives you money or not. But at least respect is when you go to bed at night, you'll feel good about yourself. So that I know. So.
Thank you very much, Rohan. I think that was a
thank you all.
Fantastic conversation. And I wish you much success the way you would like to see success, though we feel that, in terms of what you're doing, it's very successful from our lens. But yes, of course, I wish you all it will take to make you feel successful for yourself.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Ritu Marya and Rohan as well, please. Well, we have the unveiling of Entrepreneur Feb issue, and I'd like you, Rohan, and Ritu to do the honors. Well, talking about respect and money, Rohan, I don't have respect, neither do I have money. So what do I do?
No, Siddharth, you foxed me. I don't know what to tell you. But maybe then you should strive for respect instead, and maybe it'll work out.
What do I do? Just tell me one thing that I can earn respect, man. One thing. I want a silver jacket, it's not working.
I don't know what to tell you then.
Okay, brothers. Right now, this is the unveiling. That is my wife's gown, which I've torn and put over here. Ladies and gentlemen, the unveiling of the Feb issue of Entrepreneur, featuring Rohan Murty, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, we have your 35 under 35 second certificate from our behalf. I really like that certificate, Ritu. There you go. Rohan, that's a very familiar face. I like it. Can you tell us something about this picture? This is really nice. They made you sit on a box.
No, I actually, one of your colleagues who came over, Punita, I think they were very disappointed. They said, you have to wear a suit, and I actually don't have a suit. I have one suit, and that's in Boston, and this was in Bangalore. So I think they got the impression that I was being very difficult, and I said, no, I'm not. I have 4 pants and 6 t-shirts and 2 sweaters and 1 hat. And I said, you choose whatever you want from this. And
So out of those 2 sweaters, they picked up 1 sweater.
yeah, that's right.
And what about your shoes? How many pair of shoes you have? You're wearing the same shoes. How many pairs? Like 2, 3?
1. So.
Wow. Can I tell you a place where I borrow clothes? Per hour, 200 rupees, you get more clothes. It's a great guy. It's my neighbor's wife called Rakhi.
I'm sorry, I don't know who you're referring to.
But you know what? I love your humility, and that's the most beautiful aspect of you, ladies and gentlemen, is humility and simplicity. Give it up for an achiever like him. Thank you so much. See you soon, and I will earn respect one day. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you should use the whistle for Rohan as well. Yeah, come on, man. Everybody use it on your table. That's important. Come on.